Hi everyone, today we did get that sell-off that we had hoped for. We got a little bit of continuation, just a slight reprieve here, hit that 21 EMA and then rejected down to the 200, down to that next level, 597.63. So if you took the trade here yesterday for that short, you would have exited here towards the end of the session, and then we're going to see tomorrow. Do we get a continuation through that area? What does the FOMC bring? Let's take a look at all of the data and charts. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. In news today, we did get retail sales falling by 0.9 in May, far worse than expectation, more than the 0.6 drop that we did expect. So a little bit more of a pullback in the economy. We're starting to see consumer demand pull back a little bit, and this is another data point for that. Autos also falling 0.3%, worse than the estimate gain of a 0.1%. So starting to see declines, not just slowing, but actual declines in consumer purchasing. And then we have an update here with the Israeli-Iranian conflict. You got Trump saying he wants an unconditional surrender, as is the usual for the United States. The president said that the Ayatollah is an easy target and that their patience is wearing thin. Trump demands that Tehran surrender, or that this conflict could potentially escalate. So not what you wanted to see for the bullish side for markets. If this continues to go higher here, the risk is that you start to pull other countries into this conflict, which then would have a bigger impact on the US economy. For now, it doesn't seem to be having a major impact, and I agree with that, but ultimately, if this continues to expand and go on, I think the risk to the global economy starts to become a bigger one. Moving over to fear and greed, pretty big step down to a 54 from a 62. We did see that price action pull back pretty dramatically here today. Strength, still no movement. Breadth, still very little movement. Put call ratio, however, starting to see that spike back up to a 0.71. I'm expecting this to rally pretty aggressively here up to that kind of 0.8 to 0.9 area. So a couple more days of movement there at least. Is the FOMC the catalyst for that? I think that remains to be seen. Volatility also spiking up, expecting that to hit that 50-day at least. That would be at the 24 area. We're right now at 21.6, and then you got safe haven demand flatlining here back into neutral, junk bonds still in neutral. Moving over to the economic calendar, you can see that retail sales absolutely terrible, minus 0.3 versus the 0.2 expectation. Even the previous number was revised down to flat from slightly positive. Exports not good at all. Headline retail sales way worse than expectations. Absolutely not good. And then looking at tomorrow, you get CPI for the Eurozone, and of course the FOMC decision tomorrow. Not expecting any movement here. And then for the Thursday, Friday, you do get initial jobless claims. Don't forget Juneteenth here for the Thursday, so closed on Juneteenth. And then Friday, basically nothing in here except for Philly Fed manufacturing. And then looking at the Fed interest rate monitor here, you can see we're basically 100% likely to get a pause, and that is the expectations. Same for July, no movement there. The first real chance of a cut is out in September right now at 54%. And then when you start to look out to October, really the same percentage. So you could argue between September, October, we should get at least one cut. And then do we get another one into the kind of October, December timeframe? That's where it gets a little bit more murky. More likely of being at that 3.75 to 4 range by December, which does facilitate that 2 cuts that they signaled earlier in the year. Moving over to Max Pain, don't forget this is quad witching week. Max Pain is 580. Total options stepped up quite a lot to 4.6 million on the SPY chart. Put call ratio is still relatively low for the amount of options that are in markets. 580 is that zone here, still expecting to get a lot closer to that for the end of the week. We haven't seen a ton of movement in that direction yet, but tomorrow and the Friday sessions, I believe we will definitely see more movement towards that area. Moving over to the SPY charts here, you can see that sell that we got today, about 1%, just short of 1%, went right to the level 597.63 as we expected that it would. Yesterday went to that level. So again, like we talked about yesterday, if you took the trade here, 604.50, got the continuation down to that 597 level, that would be your first take profit. Your next one would be that 591.09 level. You can see momentum fading a little bit. All of the volume was selling volume on the last candle of the day, and then we're starting to see that drift a little bit lower. 21 EMA on the daily chart, 593.96. So right in here, right in that 594 area, momentum bearish RSI. The exact setup that you would want to see here, breakdown, retest, breakdown, continuation. Everything points to this continuing to go lower here over the next couple days. And I am expecting the FOMC to continue to push us lower. Moving over to the Tasty charts, you can see that continuation selling here. On the 4-hour chart, we're still finding support at that 55 EMA, 595.35 is that support. We touched it here, caught a bounce. We're touching it again. Are we going to push through there? Trailing stop right now, 594.84, so a little bit above that level that we talked about on the previous charts. If this zone breaks, then you got the 89 sitting there at 591.72, which is pretty much in line with that next target that we looked for. So that is what I'm looking for over the next 2 trading days or so, at least that 591 area. Realistically, I think it could go lower than that. Moving over to the NASDAQ charts here, down again, close to 1%, 0.98, and then drifting a little bit lower here after hours. 523.24 is that next level, with the 21 EMA being in there as well. 524.43, got some trend support in there. Also momentum bearish, RSI, same kind of setup. Breakdown, retest, breakdown. Everything continues to look a little bit bearish, and then you can see here 200 SMA, that was support the last 2 iterations. Now we're touching that and drifting below it in the after hours. Momentum still bearish, RSI still bearish. Most of the volume coming through on that last candle of the day, which was a selling candle, and now we're getting continued drifting lower after that volume push, which again to me says this should continue lower. Moving over to the Tasty charts here for the NASDAQ, you can see that same kind of sell-off, kind of high, lower high setup here, continuation towards that 55 EMA on the 4-hour, that is at 527.15. Trailing stop still bullish here at 524.68, but dropping to that hourly chart, you can see we did flip back to bearish conditions. Trailing stop right now, 533.60. We didn't really get anywhere close to that once it broke on the 12 o'clock candle. Big sells through there. Right now, the lowest ATR band is 527.08. I suspect we'll get at least to that level tomorrow. You can see the volume coming through at the end of the session on that selling movement. So price going lower as volume is kind of ramping here says this should continue lower tomorrow. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, you can see the Russell selling off 1%, Dow selling off 0.75%. Definitely looking a little bit bearish here, right at that 21, right at VWAP. 208.22 is the level. You can see in the after hours, we're right there, 208.22 to the penny. If that level breaks, then we're looking for this kind of 205 to kind of 205.30 area. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish, and then looking at Dow here, you can see same kind of thesis. Did get the slight bounce yesterday, continuation lower today, right at that 200, 423.23 was that level, and now in the after hours we are drifting further below that. The closing price was 423.11, 423.07 is the current, expecting this to go a little bit lower. Still have to get through the low from the Friday session, but your next support for me is going to be that 418.38 level. Moving over to the Mag 7 here, you can see this continues to go a little bit lower in this consolidation. You got a high, slightly lower high here. We're still sitting at that 8 EMA at 316.56, expecting this to drift at least to 315.04, and then the 21 EMA is your next support at 312.42. Does it get through this area and drift back down to 305? I think that remains to be seen. The NASDAQ does look pretty bearish, but the Mag 7 doesn't look as bad here. You can see still in this kind of same zone, retest breakdown structure. It still looks a little bit bearish on the indicators, but price action has held up quite well. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft. Apple down 1.4%, clean through that level, 196.79. This has been the zone where every time we get here, we do tend to buy up. We got here back in April and May, and then here towards the end of May, and we are back here in the middle of June. Is this the zone where we're going to see buyers come in a little bit? Certainly a possibility. Right now, support for me is that 193.96 level, the same level that we tagged both times in May before we saw bounces, but momentum bearish, RSI a little bit bearish. I would argue that this structure is quite bearish, but it's not impossible that we see one more bounce from this zone. And then you got Microsoft not really moving a whole lot today, down just a quarter, still right in the same consolidation area from the last 4 days, still right at all-time highs. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA, you got Tesla falling almost 4%. We talked about this zone being a zone of resistance. We had the RSI right there as a zone to retest. We talked about how if it was going to sell, it needed to do it here, and sure enough, it has sold. Expecting this to go a little bit lower, I would say 55 EMA is probably your target in this kind of 296.50 area, my level 301.93 in here. And then looking at NVIDIA, this continues to look very similar structure actually to Microsoft. Very strong, very close to all-time highs, but the momentum is a little bit bearish. RSI definitely overbought. If 140.76 goes, maybe we see this sell a little bit more, but I probably wouldn't be shorting NVIDIA here until we start to see this structure break a little bit more. Moving over to Meta and Broadcom, you can see these are both hesitating at some really high levels here. Meta showing some topping pattern. You kind of see a double top forming here, starting to sell a little bit. Momentum bearish. RSI, same kind of setup as we've been watching. Breakdown, retest, breakdown. And then Broadcom, it's been a very powerful stock, getting to all-time highs just a couple days ago. Now you got to bounce with a feeble lower high setup here, starting to sell a little bit more. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. If we start to see some of these stronger stocks pull back a little bit, that is not usually a good indicator of higher prices to come. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, you got an everything sell here today. Absolutely not what you want to see. If you are trading to the bull side, you got staples selling off almost 1% right here, 80.54. And then looking at discretionaries, selling a little bit over 1.5% right to the level 210.43. We're right there. 200 SMA is still support at 209.47. But if this goes, looking for this to go at least another 2 to 3% in here to that 203.98 area, 55 EMA there as well, around 203. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. So everything sell usually means markets are set to go quite a bit lower here over the coming weeks. Moving over to the 20 and the 50-day here, you can see 20-day breadth down 27.8% right to that 36 area. I'm expecting it to go through there, momentum bearish, RSI bearish, and then 50-day breadth here, big sell-off finally, cutting through that 21 EMA. Haven't seen that for a while. Momentum bearish, RSI breaking down from that retest area. Expecting this to go quite a bit lower. Let's extend this out here right to there or so, 55.97, and then the level here, 52.81 at that 200 area. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. Moving over to J&K and TLT. J&K, no movement here really at all again. And then looking at TLT, nice little up move, 1.2% to the upside, back above that 85.90 level. Headed towards the 55 EMA, momentum bullish, RSI bullish. You can see pullback, test, and bounce from that RSI SMA, so that looks good. Still like this as a bullish structure. Want to see this go to 89 at least. Once we do get that cut in either September or October, we should definitely see this start to go quite a bit higher. And I think markets are going to start to price that in as we go forward here. I would argue probably a month before, as we start to get those last pieces of data, we should see bonds start to accelerate higher. Moving over to the VIX did get a spike up here, up 12, almost 13% there towards that 55 EMA, the next target at 24.41. And then above that, I have 28.89 as the next zone that we're watching for. Momentum bullish, RSI bullish, everything says the VIX should continue higher as we get closer to that FOMC meeting tomorrow. Moving over to my accounts here, you can see we were up about $650 on the day as markets continue to go back lower as we expected. These calls did benefit, so open profit there now, $736. Still a lot of profit potential, and if we do get that continuation lower, as I suspect that we will, then we should see a lot more profits come through on here. And that's the only position I have, just those two short calls that are pretty deep in the money. Lots of bearish deltas, expecting markets to go lower, and hopefully the FOMC is the catalyst for that bigger move. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of the consumer confidence or the US consumer. Will retail sales be a leading indicator for a weakening economy? And what will ultimately come from an Iranian escalation between Israel and Iran? Will that continue to escalate and potentially pull in other major countries into that conflict, or will it stay isolated? Let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.